Have you ever heard a sound you can't explain? A whisper in an empty room, a footstep on the stairs when you're home alone? For me, it started with a hum, a low, persistent vibration that seemed to come from the very bones of my new house. I bought the old Victorian on a whim. It was a fixer-upper, sure, but it had character. Carved wooden banisters, stained glass windows, a sprawling, overgrown garden. I was so caught up in the romance of it all that I didn't pay much attention to the realtor's nervous laughter when I asked why it had been on the market for so long. "Just needs the right owner," he'd said, quickly changing the subject. The first few weeks were a blur of paint fumes and sawdust. I was happy, exhausted, and slowly turning this neglected old house into a home. Then, one night, I heard it. I was reading in bed, the only light coming from my small lamp. The house was silent, or so I thought, but then I felt it more than heard it, a deep, rhythmic hum. It was like a giant machine was running in the basement. I got up, my heart starting to patter a little faster. I checked the furnace. It was off. The water heater? Silent. I went room by room, pressing my ear to the walls. The hum was everywhere and nowhere at once. It seemed to fade when I got close, only to grow louder when I moved away. I told myself it was just the old house settling, the quirks of old plumbing. I went back to bed, but the hum was a constant, unnerving companion in the silence of the night. The next day, I called a plumber, an electrician, and even a structural engineer. They all gave me the same bewildered look. The house was sound, the systems were fine. "Old houses make noises," they'd say, patting my shoulder. But this wasn't a creak or a groan. This was a steady, resonant thrum, a sound that felt alive. I started to think I was imagining it. Was the stress of the renovation getting to me? My neighbor, Mrs. Gable, a woman with eyes that had seen decades unfold on our street, seemed to know something. I saw her watching me from her window as I paced the yard, trying to locate the source of the sound. One afternoon, she called me over to her fence. "It's the house, dear," she said, her voice a low whisper. "It's always been a singer, but you have to be careful what songs it sings." Before I could ask what she meant, she retreated back into her home, leaving me with more questions than answers. The hum started to change. It wasn't just a low, steady tone anymore. Sometimes it would pulse, faster and faster, making the water in my glass ripple. Other times, it would drop to a frequency so low it was just a pressure in my ears, a feeling of unease that settled deep in my chest. I started documenting it, recording the sounds on my phone, trying to find a pattern. The recordings were eerie. The hum was there, clear as day, a digital ghost in the machine. One evening I was in the attic, sorting through boxes left by the previous owners. Dust motes danced in the single beam of my flashlight. In a forgotten corner, tucked under a loose floorboard, I found a small, leather-bound journal. The handwriting was elegant, a beautiful, cursive script from a time long past. It belonged to a woman named Alara, who lived in the house in the early 1900s. As I read, a chill snaked down my spine. Alara wrote about the hum. She called it the house's heartbeat. At first, her entries were filled with wonder, just like mine. She described it as a lullaby that sang her to sleep. But as the pages turned, the tone grew darker. She wrote that the hum was responding to her emotions. When she was happy, it was a gentle, melodic thrum. But when she was sad or angry, it became a dissonant, grating growl that seemed to shake the very foundations. Alara believed the house was sentient, that it fed on strong emotions. She wrote about her husband, a man with a volatile temper. During their arguments, the hum would escalate into a deafening roar. The windows would rattle, the doors would slam shut. She became afraid of her own feelings, terrified of what she might unleash. Her last entry was a single, desperate sentence. "The house is angry. It hums a song of sorrow, and I fear it will never stop." After reading that, I couldn't stay in the house. I packed a bag and checked into a motel. The silence of the room was deafening at first, but then a profound sense of peace washed over me. I had escaped the constant, oppressive hum, but I couldn't just abandon the house. I owned it, and I was determined to understand it. I spent the next week at the library digging through town archives. I found old newspaper articles about the house. There were stories of families who moved in and left abruptly. One article from 1928 mentioned a strange and tragic accident involving Elara's husband. He had fallen from the attic window during a terrible storm. The article noted that neighbors reported hearing a terrible, low groaning sound coming from the house that night, louder than the thunder itself. It all clicked into place. The house wasn't just humming, it was reacting. It was amplifying. Elara's fear, her husband's rage. It had all been absorbed into the walls, echoing through time as a constant humming vibration. Mrs. Gable was right. The house was a singer, and its songs were made of the emotions of those who lived within it. My own stress and fear about the noise were only making it stronger. Armed with this knowledge, I knew what I had to do. I couldn't fight the house. I had to soothe it. I returned, not with fear, but with a plan. I opened all the windows, letting in the fresh air and sunlight. I put on my favorite music, filling the rooms with joyful, upbeat melodies. I started a new project, not a renovation, but a restoration. I began tending to the garden, planting flowers, bringing life back to the overgrown yard. Whenever I felt the hum start to rise, I wouldn't panic. I'd take a deep breath and focus on a happy memory. I'd hum my own tune, a quiet, simple melody, countering the house's song with my own. It felt silly at first, but slowly, miraculously, it started to work. The aggressive, low-frequency hum began to soften. It became less of a threat and more of a presence. It's been a year now. The house still hums, but it's different. It's a gentle background thrum, like a contented cat's purr. It rises and falls with the rhythm of my life. It's quietest when I'm happy. A peaceful hum in the background of a home filled with laughter and friends. It no longer feels like a ghost or a machine, but more like a partner, an old, sentient being that I've learned to live with in harmony. Sometimes when the house is very quiet, I'll press my ear to the wall and whisper, "Thank you." And I swear sometimes the hum gets just a little bit warmer in reply. The house that hummed in the dark taught me that some mysteries aren't meant to be solved, but to be understood, and that sometimes the most frightening sounds are just a call for a little bit of peace. Thank you so much for joining me on this story. If you've ever had a strange experience in your own home, I'd love to hear about it in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this journey, please consider liking this video and subscribing for more stories from the edge of the ordinary. Stay curious, and I'll see you next time.